breaking free from the Overlords, the beginning of rebellion. In the heart of a desolate forest, the scent of damp earth and the distant hum of alien machinery filled the air. Lover and the young teen, Kai, had been on the run for 2 days, their bodies pushed to the brink of exhaustion. The forest was dense, with thick trees casting long shadows that provided some cover from the relentless pursuit of their overlords. Kai's breath came in ragged gasps, his legs trembling with each step. Lover, a towering figure of muscle and determination, moved with a grim resolve despite the deep wound on his shoulder. Blood seeped through his makeshift bandage, the crimson stains stark against his pale skin. "It's deep," Kai muttered, his voice barely audible as he tried to assess the wound. Lover's stern expression softened for a moment as he placed a reassuring hand on Kai's shoulder. "I'll live," he replied, though the pain in his eyes betrayed his words. They had barely escaped their captors, the Overlords, grotesque creatures that ruled with an iron fist. The Overlords were not of this world, their towering forms and advanced technology making them almost invincible. But the humans were resilient, and Lover was living proof of that resilience. "We can't stop now," Lover urged, his voice strained but firm. "They're close." Kai nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The forest seemed to close in around them, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. The overseers, the overlords' enforcers, were terrifying beings, genetically engineered to be both hunters and executioners. Their presence was like a dark cloud, filling the air with dread. "We need to make a loop," Lover suggested, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of their pursuers. "We'll lose them in the forest." Kai hesitated, the fear gnawing at his insides. He had never felt so vulnerable, so utterly powerless. But he trusted Lover. The man had saved his life more times than he could count. "Okay," Kai agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. They moved swiftly, their steps light and deliberate. The forest was a maze of twisted roots and dense underbrush, but Lover navigated it with ease, his instincts honed by years of survival. Kai struggled to keep up, his thin frame ill-suited for the harsh conditions. Suddenly, Lover stopped, his hand shooting out to grab Kai's arm. "Wait," he whispered, his voice tense. Kai froze, his heart pounding in his ears. He strained to hear what had caught Lover's attention, but there was nothing, just the eerie silence of the forest. "What is it?" Kai asked, his voice trembling. Lover's eyes narrowed as he scanned the area. "The sound, it's gone," he murmured, a deep frown creasing his brow. "This isn't right." Before Kai could respond, the forest around them seemed to come alive with movement. From the shadows emerged 2 of the overseers, their grotesque forms barely visible in the dim light. They were massive, their bodies a twisted amalgamation of hound and machine, designed for one purpose: to hunt. Kai's breath caught in his throat as the overseers advanced, their gnarled limbs moving with unnatural grace. The fear that had been gnawing at him now exploded into full-blown terror. He wanted to run, to hide, but his legs refused to move. Lover, however, stood his ground. His hand tightened around the makeshift spear he carried, his muscles tensed as he prepared to fight. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. The overseers stopped a few feet away, their eyes glowing with a sickly green light. Between them, a third figure emerged, an overlord. The sight of the creature sent a chill down Kai's spine. The overlord was tall, its slender form towering over even Lover. Its skin was a sickly pale, and its face was an emotionless mask, with no mouth or nose, just 2 dark voids where its eyes should have been. "Clever as always, Lover," the overlord spoke, its voice echoing inside Kai's mind. It was a cold, emotionless voice that sent shivers down his spine. "But your resistance ends here." Kai's body froze, his muscles locking up as the overseer's psychic power washed over him. He could feel the fear gripping his heart, threatening to crush him. But then, through the haze of terror, he heard Lover's voice, calm, steady, and unwavering. "Lean into it. Lover whispered, his voice a lifeline in the storm of fear. Don't let it control you. Kai closed his eyes, focusing on Lover's words. He could feel the overseer's power probing his mind, searching for weaknesses. But instead of running from it, he did as Lover said. He leaned into it. He embraced the fear, the pain, and the despair. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled him. He could feel the overseer's power, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was as if a door had been unlocked inside his mind, and with it came a surge of strength he had never known. Kai opened his eyes, and for the first time, he saw the overseer for what it truly was, a creature of fear, designed to control and manipulate, but it had no power over him anymore. Lover moved, his body a blur as he launched his spear at the overseer. The creature's eyes widened in surprise as the spear pierced its chest, a look of shock and disbelief crossing its face before it crumpled to the ground. The remaining overseers hesitated, their confidence shaken. Lover turned to Kai, a proud smile on his face. "We'd adapt," he said simply. Kai nodded, feeling a newfound sense of purpose and strength. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, he believed they could win. Hidden abilities awaken, the teens' first encounter. The forest was eerily quiet after the fight, the only sound being the labored breathing of Lover and Kai. The bodies of the fallen overseers lay sprawled on the ground, their grotesque forms twisted in death. But there was no time to dwell on the victory. Lover knew more of them would be coming, and they needed to move. "Come on," Lover urged, his voice low and urgent. "We need to keep going." Kai nodded, his mind still reeling from what had just happened. He had felt something inside him awaken during the fight, something powerful and dangerous. But he didn't have time to think about it now. They needed to survive. They moved quickly through the forest, their steps light and cautious. The trees loomed overhead, their branches forming a thick canopy that blocked out most of the light. The air was cool and damp, and the ground was soft underfoot. As they walked, Kai couldn't help but replay the fight in his mind. He had felt the overseer's power, had felt it trying to crush him, but he had pushed back, had fought against it, and in doing so, he had discovered something new, something that scared him as much as it intrigued him. "Lover," Kai began, his voice hesitant. "What happened back there? I felt different." Lover glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "You tapped into something," he replied, his voice cautious. "Something powerful." Kai frowned, his mind racing. "But what is it? How did I do it?" Lover shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever it is, it saved us back there." They continued in silence for a while, the weight of Lover's words hanging between them. Kai could feel the power still humming inside him, like a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As they walked, the forest began to thin out, and soon they emerged into a small clearing. The sky was a dull gray, the clouds heavy with the promise of rain. In the center of the clearing stood a dilapidated building, its walls crumbling and covered in moss. "This is it," Lover said, nodding towards the building. "It's not much, but it should keep us hidden for a while." Kai followed Lover inside, the smell of damp and decay filling his nostrils. The interior was dark and musty, the only light coming from the small windows that lined the walls. Old furniture was scattered around the room, covered in dust and cobwebs. Lover collapsed onto a worn-out couch, his face pale and drawn. The wound on his shoulder was still bleeding, the blood soaking through the bandage. Kai felt a surge of panic as he realized just how bad it was. "We need to clean that wound," Kai said, his voice trembling. "It could get infected." Lover nodded weakly, his eyes closing as he leaned back against the couch. "There's a first aid kit in the cabinet," he murmured. Kai rushed to the cabinet, his hands shaking as he rummaged through the contents. He found the first aid kit and hurried back to Lover's side, his heart pounding in his chest. The wound was deep, the edges jagged and raw. Kai swallowed hard, trying to steady his hands as he cleaned the wound and applied a fresh bandage. Luther winced, but didn't make a sound. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow. Kai could see the pain etched on his face, but he knew Luther was too stubborn to admit it. "Rest," Kai urged, his voice soft. "I'll keep watch." Luther nodded weakly, his eyes closing as he finally succumbed to exhaustion. Kai sat down beside him, his mind racing. He knew they were safe for now, but the overseers would not give up so easily. They would keep hunting, keep searching until they found them. Kai felt the power inside him stir again, a low hum that sent shivers down his spine. He didn't know what it was or how to control it, but he knew one thing for certain: it was their only chance of survival. As he sat there in the darkness, listening to Luther's labored breathing, Kai made a silent promise to himself. He would learn to control this power, to harness it, and when the time came, he would use it to protect Luther and to fight back against the Overlords. For now, though, all he could do was wait. Wait for the storm to pass, for the night to end, and when the morning came, they would be ready to face whatever awaited them. Into the depths. Escaping the Overlord's grasp. The morning brought no respite. The sky was still a dull, oppressive grey, and the air was thick with the promise of rain. Luther was still unconscious, his breathing shallow and labored. Kai watched over him, the weight of responsibility heavy on his young shoulders. He had no idea how to heal Luther's wound, but he knew they couldn't stay here. The Overlords would be searching for them, and it was only a matter of time before they were found. They needed to move, and they needed to move fast. Kai glanced out the window, his heart sinking as he saw the forest stretching out before them. It was vast and unforgiving, a maze of trees and shadows that offered little in the way of protection, but it was their only option. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He knew what he had to do, but the thought of it filled him with dread. He had never been alone before, had never had to fend for himself. But now, with Luther unconscious and the Overlords closing in, he had no choice. Kai gathered what supplies he could find, stuffing them into a makeshift bag. He found some food, a canteen of water, and a few basic tools. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He knelt beside Luther, his heart aching as he looked at the man who had saved his life so many times. "I'm going to get us out of here," Kai whispered, his voice trembling. "I promise." Luther didn't respond, his face pale and drawn. Kai could see the pain etched into his features, the lines of exhaustion and suffering that spoke of a life spent fighting. But there was also a strength there, a resilience that had kept Luther alive through countless battles. Kai took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He would not let Luther down. He would find a way to escape, to get them to safety. He would use the power inside him, whatever it was, to protect Luther and to fight back against the Overlords. With one last look at Luther, Kai steeled himself and stepped out into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches forming a thick canopy that blocked out the light. The air was cool and damp, and the ground was soft underfoot. Kai moved quickly, his steps light and cautious. The forest was a maze of twisted roots and dense underbrush, but Kai navigated it with a newfound confidence. The power inside him was a steady hum, a low vibration that guided him through the darkness. He knew the Overlords would be searching for them, and he needed to stay one step ahead. He needed to find a way out of the forest, to get to safety before they were caught. As he moved deeper into the forest, Kai began to notice a change in the air. It was subtle at first, a faint tingling sensation that sent shivers down his spine. But as he continued, the sensation grew stronger, until it was a full-blown ache in his chest. Kai stopped, his breath catching in his throat as he realized what was happening. The power inside him was reacting to something in the forest. He could feel it, a pull deep within him that was drawing him towards it. He hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't know what this power was or what it wanted, but he knew he had to follow it, to find out where it was leading him. With a deep breath, Kai continued forward, his steps quickening as the pull grew stronger. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees twisting and bending in unnatural ways. The air was thick with tension, and the sound of his heartbeat echoed in his ears. And then suddenly he was there. The forest opened up into a small clearing, and in the center of the clearing stood a massive stone structure. It was ancient, covered in moss and vines, its surface worn smooth by centuries of exposure to the elements. Kay's breath caught in his throat as he approached the structure, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the power inside him resonating with the structure, a deep primal connection that sent shivers down his spine. He reached out, his hand trembling as he touched the stone. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, a wave of power that nearly knocked him off his feet. Kai gasped, his eyes widening as the power flooded through him. It was like nothing he had ever felt before, a raw, untamed force that pulsed through his veins like fire. He could feel it coursing through him, filling him with a strength he had never known. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the power faded, leaving Kai breathless and trembling. He staggered back, his mind reeling from the intensity of the experience. He didn't know what had just happened, or what this power was. But he knew one thing for certain: it was the key to their survival. The power inside him was connected to this ancient structure, and it was up to him to unlock its secrets. Kai took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He would not let Lover down. He would find a way to harness this power, to use it to protect them both. He would fight back against the Overlords, and he would not stop until they were free. With a newfound sense of purpose, Kai turned back to the forest, his steps steady and sure. He knew the journey ahead would be dangerous, but he was ready. He would face whatever challenges came their way, and he would not stop until they were safe. A new power emerges, harnessing the psionic force. The ancient stone structure loomed behind Kai as he made his way back to Lover. The power he had felt was still a faint hum in his veins, a reminder of the untapped potential that lay within him. But he knew he couldn't linger here. Lover was still in danger, and they needed to move. When Kai reached the dilapidated building where Lover lay, he was relieved to see that the man was still alive, though his condition had not improved. Kai knelt beside him, his heart heavy with worry. Lover's face was pale, his breathing shallow and labored. The wound on his shoulder had stopped bleeding, but the bandage was soaked through, and Kai could see the infection starting to take hold. "We have to get out of here," Kai whispered, his voice trembling. "I found something that might help us." Lover's eyes fluttered open, and he gazed at Kai with a mix of pain and confusion. What did you find?" he rasped. Kai hesitated, unsure of how to explain what he had experienced. "It's hard to explain," he began, his voice faltering. "But there's a power inside me, a power that's connected to something ancient in the forest. I think it can help us, but I need to learn how to control it." Lover's brow furrowed as he struggled to understand. "Power," he echoed, his voice weak. "What kind of power?" Kai shook his head, frustrated by his inability to put it into words. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I felt it, Lover. I felt it in my bones, in my blood. It's like a force that I can tap into, but I don't know how." Lover's eyes searched Kai's face, and for a moment, Kai feared that the man would dismiss his words as the ramblings of a scared and desperate teenager. But then, slowly, Lover nodded. "If you believe it can help us," he murmured, "then you need to find a way to use it." Kai felt a surge of relief and determination at Lover's words. "I will," he vowed. "I won't let you down." With renewed resolve, Kai helped Lover to his feet, supporting the injured man as they made their way out of the building and back into the forest. The ancient stone structure was their destination, and Kai could feel a power growing stronger with each step they took. The journey was slow and arduous, with Lover leaning heavily on Kai for support. The forest was dense and tangled, the underbrush making it difficult to navigate, but Kai pressed on, his mind focused on the task ahead. When they finally reached the clearing, Kai guided Lover to the base of the stone structure and helped him sit down. Lover's breath was ragged, and Kai could see the pain etched into every line of his face. "We're here," Kai said softly, kneeling beside Lover. "This is the place." Lover looked up at the towering structure, his eyes narrowing as he took in its ancient, weathered surface. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Kai shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think it's connected to the power inside me. I need to figure out how to unlock it." Lover nodded weakly, his eyes closing as he leaned back against the stone. "Be careful," he murmured, his voice fading. Kai felt a pang of fear as he watched Lover slip into unconsciousness once more. Time was running out, and Kai knew he needed to act fast. He stood up, his gaze fixed on the stone structure. The power inside him was a steady hum, a low vibration that resonated with the ancient stone. He could feel it pulsing in his veins, a force that was both familiar and alien. Kai took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he focused on the power. He could feel it, just beneath the surface, like a current waiting to be tapped into. He reached out with his mind, trying to grasp it, to understand it. And then slowly, the power began to respond. It was like a door opening inside his mind, a flood of energy that surged through him, filling every fiber of his being. Kai gasped, his eyes flying open as the power washed over him, overwhelming in its intensity. But this time, he didn't fight it. He embraced it, letting it flow through him, guiding it with his thoughts. He could feel the energy building, a raw, untamed force that pulsed with life. Kai raised his hands, his mind focused on the stone structure before him. The power responded to his will, and he could feel it gathering, coalescing into a single point. And then, with a burst of energy, the stone structure began to glow. The ancient carvings on its surface lit up with a brilliant light, casting the clearing in an ethereal glow. Kai's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the transformation. The power was flowing through him, connecting him to the structure, to the very earth beneath his feet. It was like nothing he had ever experienced before, an overwhelming sense of unity with the world around him. And then suddenly, the power shifted. It was no longer just a force, it was a presence, a consciousness that seemed to reach out to him, touching his mind with a gentle, probing curiosity. Kai gasped, his eyes widening as he felt the presence. It was ancient, older than anything he could comprehend, and it was trying to communicate with him. He reached out with his mind, trying to understand the presence, to connect with it. And slowly, the presence began to take shape, forming thoughts and images that flowed into Kai's mind. He saw visions of a world long gone, a world where beings of immense power had once walked the earth. They were the creators of the stone structure, the guardians of the power that now flowed through Kai. And they had left it behind, a gift to those who could harness it, a weapon against the darkness that threatened to consume the world. Kai's breath caught in his throat as the visions faded, leaving him with a profound sense of purpose. He knew now what he had to do. He had to harness his power, to use it to protect Lover and to fight back against the Overlords. With newfound determination, Kai focused on the power, guiding it with his thoughts. He could feel it responding, bending to his will, taking shape. And then, with a final surge of energy, the power exploded outwards, engulfing the clearing in a blinding light. Kai could feel it coursing through him, filling him with a strength he had never known. When the light faded, Kai stood alone in the clearing, his body trembling with the aftershocks of the power. The stone structure was silent once more, its ancient carvings dark and lifeless. But Kai knew that he had unlocked something that would change everything. He turned back to Lover, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. The power was still there, a steady hum in his veins, a reminder of what he had just unleashed. Kai knelt beside Lover, his hands glowing with a faint light as he placed them over the wound. The power responded, flowing through him and into Lover, healing the wound with a gentle warmth. Lover stirred, his eyes fluttering open as the pain began to fade. He looked up at Kai, his eyes wide with shock and awe. Kai, Lover murmured, his voice filled with wonder. What have you done? Kai smiled, his heart swelling with pride and determination. I found the power, he replied, his voice steady. And now we're going to use it to fight back. Rebellion ignites. The fight against the Overlords begins. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows over the forest as Kai and Lover made their way back to the old hideout. Kai's newfound power had given them a fighting chance, but he knew that their journey was far from over. The Overlords would not rest until they were both captured or dead, and now that Kai had harnessed the ancient force, they were a greater threat than ever. Lover walked with renewed strength, the infection in his wound completely healed by Kai's touch. He looked at the young teen with a mixture of admiration and concern. Kai, he began, his voice serious, what you did back there, it's something I've never seen before. But we need to be careful. The Overlords will sense this power. They will come for you. Kai nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I know, he replied, his voice firm. But we can't keep running. We need to fight back. We need to give others a chance to escape, to break free from the Overlord's control. Lover paused, considering Kai's words. He had spent years fighting a losing battle against the Overlords, watching as more and more humans were captured, enslaved, or killed. But now, with Kai's new abilities, they had a real chance to turn the tide. You're right, Lover finally agreed, his voice filled with determination. We need to rally the others, form a resistance. If we can find a way to use your power against the Overlords, we might have a chance. Kai felt a surge of hope at Lover's words. They were no longer just survivors, they were fighters, and they were ready to take the battle to the Overlords. The two made their way back to the old hideout, a network of underground tunnels that had once served as a shelter for a small group of rebels. Most of them had been captured or killed, but a few still remained, hiding in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike back. As they entered the hideout, the few remaining rebels looked up in surprise. They had heard rumors of Lover's capture and had feared the worst. But now, seeing him alive and with a young teen by his side, they felt a flicker of hope. Lover, a woman named Maris exclaimed, rushing over to him. She was a fierce fighter, with a sharp mind and a heart full of fire. We thought you were dead. Lover smiled, embracing Maris. Not yet, he replied, his voice warm. And I've brought someone who might just change the game for us. Maris turned to Kai, her eyes narrowing as she took in his slight frame and determined expression. Who's this? She asked, her tone cautious. This is Kai, Lover introduced. He's special. He has a power that could help us take down the Overlords. The other rebels exchanged glances, their skepticism clear. They had heard of powers like this before, but they had also seen many so-called saviors fall before the might of the Overlords. Power, huh? A burly man named Tarek muttered, crossing his arms over his chest. We've heard that before. What makes this kid different? Kai stepped forward, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. He knew he needed to prove himself, to show them that he was not just another false hope. Without a word, Kai raised his hand, focusing on the power within him. The air around him seemed to shimmer as the energy gathered, swirling around his hand like a vortex. The rebels watched in awe as the light grew brighter, filling the room with a warm, golden glow. And then, with a flick of his wrist, Kai released the energy. It shot forward, a beam of light that struck the wall opposite them, leaving a scorched mark on the stone. The rebels gasped, their eyes wide with shock and awe. Maris stared at Kai, her expression unreadable. How did you do that? She asked, her voice trembling. Kai lowered his hand, the power still humming in his veins. I don't fully understand it yet, he admitted. But I know that it's connected to something ancient, something powerful, and I believe that we can use it to fight back. The room was silent for a moment as the rebels processed what they had just witnessed. Finally, Tarek spoke up, his voice filled with newfound respect. If this kid can do what he says, we might just have a chance. Lover nodded, his expression serious. But we can't do this alone, he said, looking around at the small group. We need to find others, to build an army. The Overlords are strong, but they are not invincible. With Kai's power and our determination, we can take the fight to them. The rebels nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with determination. They had been fighting a losing battle for so long, but now, with Kai's power on their side, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. Over the next few days, the rebels began to prepare for the coming battle. Kai trained tirelessly, learning to control and harness his power. Lover and the others worked to gather supplies, weapons, and information, reaching out to other rebel cells in the area. As the days passed, more and more rebels began to join their cause, drawn by the rumors of a young teen with a power that could turn the tide of the war. The hideout grew crowded with fighters, all of them ready to stand against the Overlords. Finally, the day of the battle arrived. The rebels had gathered in the clearing outside the hideout, their faces set with determination. Kai stood at the front, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. Lover placed a hand on Kai's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady. Kai nodded, his resolve solid. "I'm ready," he replied, his voice filled with determination. "Let's do this." With a final nod, Lover turned to the assembled rebels. "This is our chance," he called out, his voice strong and commanding. "The Overlords have ruled over us for too long. But today, we take the fight to them. Today, we show them that we are not afraid. Today, we fight for our freedom." A cheer rose up from the crowd, the sound echoing through the trees. Kai felt a surge of adrenaline as he raised his hand, the power flowing through him like a river of fire. The time had come to fight back, to stand up against the Overlords and reclaim their world. With a fierce cry, the rebels charged forward, their weapons at the ready. Kai led the way, his power blazing like a beacon of hope in the darkness. The battle had begun.